everyone, welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm going to be going over the Zelda Breath of the Wild guidebook. This book is absolutely massive, with, I think, it's got about 500 pages in it. Basically goes over everything that's in the game. I think this actually even has some of the added content from later on. So let's get started. Basically, I find that with these guidebooks, for a game like Zelda Breath of the Wild, it's actually really nice to have because they give you, let's start with this, they give you a full-size map of the game, which I don't know that I'm going to be able to show the entire thing here, but I'll show as best as I can everything. But you can see it actually lays out where all of the different shrines are, and the towers, and the different regions. I found having this makes it a lot easier to easily see what might be close by, because the game is so massive that you could spend many hours just looking around, which isn't really a bad thing, but I find that when you've already got a game that's probably gonna be 60 plus hours, I don't necessarily want to spend another 30 just wandering around aimlessly looking for the various shrines. On the other side, you have, it goes over more detail about the completionist objectives. This is really hard to show. We have a forward quick start section, which goes over the basics of getting started. We have the section where this guide begins with a short primer. See page 8. This opening chapter includes all game concepts of significance, with one essential objective in mind, helping you to start the adventure with confidence. If you are a newcomer to the Legend of Zelda series, this should be your first port of call. Even longtime fans will learn a lot by reading this chapter, as Breath of the Wild has a huge number of new features that set it apart from its predecessors. And I think that's an understatement, because this game was very much a lot of new ground to the series, and breaking away from the typical formula that worked in previous installations of the Zelda world and franchise. So, this primer basically goes over some of the basic game structure and how it works with an open was neat because this is an open world, is having a map system which was built into the game, but also just a radar that would show interesting points nearby. And you had more functionality with the ability to climb right from the start. I'm trying to think if any previous Zeldas had the ability to climb. I don't think any did, at least not in the capacity of just walking up to a big cliff and then starting to scale it. But a lot of this game was very much about traversing the landside and discovering what was available. You had a lot of different mechanics thrown into this game, including newer mechanics such as being able to cook, to make food, which would adjust your health stats or your ability to withstand different temperatures. The combat system was a bit different as well, being that you had to constantly swap out weapons depending on what you had available at the time, because things just wouldn't last forever, which in some ways it's okay for the first bit, but after playing this for a while it becomes a little bit tedious, which is why you eventually want to go and get the Master Sword, which, while it does break, it regenerates over time, which I thought was a weird way of doing it. But you can see that with the attacking, you had a lot of different options. With the basic melee attack, or charged attacks, and jumping, flurry rush, perfect guard, bow attacks, throwing weapons. There was a lot of elements to coming up with different combat systems. All the different resources that were in the game. You had your standard arrows. I actually feel like bombs were a major part of the Zelda franchise until you got to Breath of the Wild, where bombs became less of a thing that really existed. While there are some explosives, like you can get materials that let you create an explosive, the idea of blowing up certain things to make secret entrances just wasn't existent in this game, which this is why I feel like a lot of it strayed very much from the original formula, and why, even though a lot of people like Breath of the Wild, there were still some polarizing opinions about it. Same with the cooking system. It's almost like they really trying to put as much systems and things as they could in the game, which I think they could have done with a little less. You had a lot of weather systems as well. That was a huge role in the game, was that it was constantly changing around between rain and thunderstorms, which, if you had any metallic items equipped, would attract the lightning. And then dealing with the various temperatures, where it would be too cold or too hot. Makeshift bridges. They really encourage people to explore the systems and using the physics built into the game to come up with different ways of handling problem solving, which I think they really leaned into a lot more in the next game, Tears of the Kingdom. So nice sort of layout of the structure. See, that first 32 pages is just the primer, giving you the basic idea of some of the things you're going to encounter, the different types of basic items, basic combat. And then you have the actual walkthrough, all of the different aspects of the game, and what you're basically trying to do with the prologue, and how you're going around and finding the first tower that expands part of the map, and the different order that you're going to be doing the shrines and exploring the area. I found they really did a good job on this guide because they really organized the content in a nice way with a lot of screenshots and nice just bits of art as you go through that really showcase some of the landscapes and elements in the game, showing you how to climb the mountain here and handle the different shrines. So the guide would be broken down with the walkthrough, breaking it down into each main section and what your main quest would be, as well as the various side quests that would be part of that area and what you might encounter. So you can see the different things that you might do with the side quests, going up to different villages, stables. What I found was the best strategy for me when playing this game is the first thing I did was set out to just do all of the towers right away, so I had the entire map visible, rather than waiting to specifically get to a certain tower. Eventually down the line, it just was a big thing for me to be able to see the entire map. So this was the primer section, going over things like the durability. It's a hidden attribute that determines how many times you can use a piece of equipment. Shields, arrows. So this would go through all of the different time where you could actually sustain it. So it really allowed you to be able to explore places that you maybe shouldn't have been going to right from the get-go. Like, if you were fast enough, you could probably complete an entire section where the temperature was really hot when you really weren't supposed to be there to begin with. There we go, the hero's sword. This was one of the main things that I wanted to do right away because I found it was annoying with the weapons breaking all the time. I mean, you'd get a weapon, you'd use it a few times, and then it'd break, and then you'd have to pick up something else. And even if you found something that was really good, it would only last a very, very short period of time. And the hero's sword is the only, as far as I know, the only unbreakable weapon in the game. But what's annoying about it, as I mentioned, was that it would still break, and it wouldn't be usable for a while until it recharged, which it would last a very long time, fortunately, but I just found it was mandatory to get that as one of the first things. So when I was playing, I focused on that because I didn't really want to have to constantly mess around with finding. I mean, some people enjoy that and it's fun once in a while, but if you're just trying to do a mission, I would find that it would make it needlessly burdensome that you'd have to carry around this entire stockpile of like sticks and swords and whatever other miscellaneous thing that you could use as a weapon when you'd go out and try and get something done. And then in some cases you'd be really stuck where you would have a good weapon and then it would just break again because there really was no notice about how long you had or how much life was left on it. It'd just break. And then if you were in a tough spot with something that was pretty strong, like in some of the shrines, for example, you're dealing with these sentry bots that take a lot of hits, and you'd have to go through several weapons, and you get really close to killing it, and then your weapon would break, and you'd be like, okay, I had this really good great sword, did a lot of damage, got him down to like, 4 or 5 hearts, about to take him out, and then it breaks, and you're like, okay, what have I got left? Well, I got this stick with felt wrapped around it, so, how much damage is that gonna possibly do? And they're beating them with a tiny stick. Needless to say, it wouldn't go well. So, we have a whole section on all of the shrines, which, to be fair, I mean, when I played the game, I had the book. It's nice to reference once in a while, but for most of the shrines, they're pretty easy. There's not really much to them, but I like that it goes over just kind of like what everything has. It really streamlines the game. If you're somebody that doesn't have a lot of time to play a game, and you want to play the game, but you don't necessarily want to have it padded out for the next 20-30 hours. I mean, a lot of people really underestimate, I think, just how much time is spent in a game doing things like, in a game like this where you're just traversing the landscape. So many hours is just running around, just trying to get from point A to point B. Another bunch of hours is trying to find things. Oh, you need to find the shrines, you have to find this or find that. And it's like, so you're roaming around trying to find these things for hours. Or when you are in a shrine, you'll see a chest in the distance and you're like, oh, I gotta get that. So it might be something that isn't as straightforward as just walk up and grab it. It's like you have to go, okay, well, there's gotta be a way to do this, and you have to figure out how to get over there, and you might spend another 10-15 minutes maybe trying to figure out, like, well, how can I get that chest and then complete this? And then you look, and it's like, you're like, oh, it's gonna be something really good, and then you get there, and it's like, what did you get? You got, a silver rupee, or, some of the things that they have here, like, I think most of these are some of especially if it's somewhere that you haven't quite been yet, rather than having to take a lot of time to think about, well, where is something that you need to get to. So, let's see, we'll sort of flip through most of these shrines. But you can see how it shows the basic paths. Most of them, again, are very straightforward, simple to get to, but some of them requires a little more thought. I don't think I really needed the guide for most of the shrines. I think there might have been one that I was just doing it completely wrong. Because I found it wasn't really explained very in depth in the game. So, mostly I was using it for making it easier to find shrines. Like, for example, I wanted to be able to upgrade to get a little more stamina, because I wanted to take on another quest and felt like having a little more stamina would make it easier. But rather than spending a bunch of time trying to find a shrine, and not just any shrine, but a shrine that was going to be something easier, because some of them, like the ones that have the sentinels, I think when I first started playing, I think one of the first shrines that I stumbled into happened to be one with like the highest level guardian in it. I had 3 hearts, so it's like, up against this complete tank of a guardian that can one-hit you. Even with 10 hearts, he can one-hit you. So, I tried that for so many times, and eventually I was like, okay, this is clearly something that needs to be done much later. But, at least being able to see what you're in for before making the whole trek out there, and going in and being like, okay, well, this is clearly beyond what I can handle at the current moment. So, all the different shrines. But the fact that they have every single one in here is pretty amazing. With a lot of details that actually show the specifics of doing it. And of course, there's something to be said by just having a tactile guidebook that you can easily reference or just look over. I think in a lot of cases it's underrated just how nice it is to have. Because most people, if they do have a problem, they just go on YouTube and then they look it up, and it's like, I don't know, there's a little more of a nostalgic feeling having a book as a reference. For me anyways. A section for the various side quests. And the different towers. I guess all of the towers are side quests. It's not really, you can do the game, I think, without revealing the map or without getting the towers, but it just makes it that much more difficult if you don't know where you're going and you've never been there before. So, I think this also talks about the seeds that you can get, and that was always one of my, like the seeds is actually one of the things that this can come in handy for, because you'd have to just be exploring around looking for these weird obscure situations that might provide the ability to get one of them, where it's like, oh, you see these boulders and you have to roll them down a hill and get one into a specific spot, and if you do that, this little guy pops up and he gives you this seed that can be used for upgrading from this other guy. But if you're trying to actively find those, that could take a lot of time, and never mind the time of actually completing the task, like if there is something that's a little more involved. So what's funny though is they have the little guys that pop up, and it's like they're always under a rock or something like that. It's like I would pick up the rock, the guy would give me the seed, and I'd always just drop the rock right on his head. He'd always be like, ugh. Like, yeah, that's kind of funny. Poor little guy. Here, have this seed, then gets clocked in the head with that's in the game, and what you can actually make if you're actually making some of these things. You can see what they can do for you, which is kind of neat. There's surprisingly a lot of different clothes in this game that can offer some benefits. Some are just purely aesthetic, but other ones have different bonuses. Like Master Sword Beam Up, or let's see what else. It can become fireproof, heat resistant. Increase your swimming speed. Going over the different types of weapons. One-handed, two-handed spears. So there is a huge amount of weapons in this game. The Master Sword, like I say, is the only one that isn't breakable. Well, permanently breakable. Of all these different things that can be used and have different bonuses. But, see, like I was saying, my big problem is that even though you have all of these different weapons, there's not really time to explore them that much because they break so quickly. I would find that you would get a weapon, and before you really had a chance to explore it or get used to it or try to plan, there's no real planning when it comes to weapons. It's like you take what you get when you find it and you use it. There's not really much of a, I have to stock up on these specific weapons and only have these ones, and you're finding them all the time. But there's such a huge array of different weapons. But every single one can be broken pretty quickly. And there really isn't anything you can do to increase the durability or to repair them once they're busted. Different shields and bows. Some of the bows are actually kind of interesting. The bows seem to last a little bit longer, but yeah. Different types of arrows, and then all the different materials. Just so many things you can collect in this game that can be used. And this is why having a guide is, oh my god, so important. Is because of the crafting system, crafting for items and crafting for food. Like, how would you know any of this stuff? You would have to spend so many hours just tinking and tweaking and, oh well, I've got these different types of foods, let's mix and match and see what happens. And it's like just so much time for what I would consider to be a tedious task of messing around. It's like I prefer to go, okay, I need something that's going to give me health or whatever. I mean, if you're not like sitting there at the cooking pot for like 10 hours and like writing down notes of like, okay, well this and this would work, and you know, doing all that, like how would you know? There's not really, as I recall, there's nowhere in game to really find this stuff out. It's mostly just trial and error. But there are so many things, it's basically could mix anything together and come up with something. But whether or not it's worth it or not really depends on if you know what the things do. All these different types of foods. And of course the seasonings. Always good to put salt on things because it would absolutely increase the power of them. Different types of elixirs. Important items. Now, bestiary. The different enemies. This is actually one area in the game that I feel like it really falls short, is that the variety of enemies, considering the giant scope of the world and the scope of everything else, they really didn't put that many different enemy types in. They would have an enemy type 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think that's it. Okay, 11, 12. A lot of these, like, these are like really rare, very rare beasts that only a few spawn in the world. But I found that in these Guardian Scouts, actually you can see them out in the world too, but there are a fixed amount of them, and they're mostly in the shrines. And then sometimes you see the cursed monsters, but the majority of monsters that you're encountering regularly are the lizard guys, moblins and bokoblins, which just feel very similar, even though they have the different varieties of them. It's just different textures with minor differences. I felt like there really just wasn't that much of a variety. I mean, I look back on a game like Zelda: A Link to the Past, and I feel like there were more of a variety of enemies and something like that, even, you know, or even in Ocarina of Time. I feel like there were more different, like a more variety enemy type. And I felt like some of the combat was just a little bit, oh yeah, these guys are pretty tough. But I feel like, it just sort of felt a little bit hollow, because then every couple of days in game, it's like everything would respawn, and it would always do that sequence, like the blood moon is out, and it would show the guys coming back to life like every couple of days in game, which was just a little bit like, okay, we get the idea. Great fairy fountains. You have a lot of different things here talking about the different obstacle courses and little mini game things, like the little mini games of flying through stuff and the horseback riding, archery, and a full compendium that talks about the different ones, where you would find them if you're looking for one in particular, because again, if you need to find a specific ingredient, it's good to know where you would find them. Secrets and Easter eggs. Weird. So apparently there's a chest that if you try to open a treasure chest while wearing no leg armor, Link will go through a special pain animation. Why? It seems so strange. Is that any treasure chest or just specific ones? Little tips. All the different Easter eggs, yeah. Which is kind of nice. We can go and check these things out. Reference and analysis. This is different places to get the resources and where they would be. Different farming. If you're gonna get the different ingredients. Different types of weapons. The ancient weapons were the best ones, really. Armor crafting. As you can see, there's just a lot where to find the different ores, so you could find them. Again, you would have to, this is the reason why I think a guide like this is invaluable, because you would have to just find these things exploring around for hours until you stumble across it, and then if you're lucky enough to think of like, oh, I should mark down the location of this. I mean, you could put a little pin in the map, so you just have to remember where these things were. The different merchants. Amiibo. Amiibo. Different merchants are what sell. Other miscellaneous information. Maps. They have all the different maps broken down, the different guide to where everything is. So all the information that's on that big map is basically broken down even further here. And you can actually see the specific pages that talk about these areas, so you can get a closer look at what happens to be around. Actually, just looking back here, I just happen to see behind destructible rocks. So there are some places that have destructible rocks, but I just feel like I don't know. I just don't remember. I just don't remember there being as many like secret places like that in this game, which you would think there would be a lot more considering the open world nature of it. But I remember a game like Link to the Past, there was all these, you pick up rocks and there'd be a little hidden area under there, blow up a wall, there'd be a hidden cave. So all these different maps. Just skip through. The Master Trials. Different side quests for that. So all in all, it was a pretty good game. I have yet to actually play through the second one. I have it, I just haven't had a chance to start into it yet. But I will get around to it at some point. Different shrines for this. The champion. You get some nice concept art, which is actually a nice touch that you get in guidebooks that you don't really see elsewhere. It's pretty amazing that the amount of effort gone into creating all these things. Tingle set. Oh my god, Tingle. So, that's basically, and then eventually you start getting the ancient stuff. At the very end, I think you actually get the motorcycle. And finally an index, where you can more easily reference things. But that is the Breath of the Wild guidebook. A massive book that basically covers every aspect of the game. So, you can still get them for a good price if you can keep an eye out. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video.